I guess it's recording. Hello. Okay, hope it is. All right, so this is essentially what you're going to end up with. So you can see you've got the model or the initial shot and the duplicate where I've adjusted it, made it a little bit longer. I've added lights so you can sort of see the spotlight. So that's all good and fine for your major project. So when I open up your scene, if I see something like that, all good. One more thing you need to do though, which is an important part of the process, because once you've made it, you need to output it to some sort of image. In this case, it's just going to be 3 still images. But when you do your shop front window animation, your project, the output is going to be an image sequence, so you can get an animation done. So you always have to think of the output. It's not going to just sit there in the grid. You need to output it to some source. Okay, so it's going to be, in this case, we're going to output it to some JPEG images. So what is rendering? Okay, so if I sort of move this around, what I do is if I just click this little icon here, render the current frame, we'll talk about it in a minute, but if I just simply click it, then that's what it produces, render view. Then you save that, and I'll save it. In this case, I'll just save it as a JPEG, which is where's JPEG? There it is. Okay, so I'll just call it 001, or render 1, doesn't really matter. I'll just save it on the desktop. Essentially what it does, I'll just close this. There we go. Go. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so it's basically just a snapshot. Okay, in its purest form, that's what a render is. But we need to make it look a little bit more interesting. So what we need to do, one thing is make it a bigger image, final rendered image. Okay, because when you're doing it with your project, you need to make sure that the resolution, the image size, is a particular size, which is 1920 by 1080. Okay, you would have been used to that because you would have done, for those people that have done their animate stuff so far with their 2D stuff, you'll see that it sort of mentions 1920 by 1080. Same sort of thing in the 3D thing. So to change the settings, you click on this this one here, the render settings. A few things here, but the first thing you need to do is scroll down, and you can see here it's got image size. Okay, image size, you put 1920 by 1080. Okay, so that should do it. So if I render it now, you should find that it's a bigger image. Okay, so you need to make sure the resolution is correct. So you change the image size to 1920 by 1080. Now, because there's not much else here, it's sort of like a floating environment. It's not going to be super interesting. But basically, if you look at the assessment task, I'm jumping back and forth here, it says you need to have 3 renders. Basically what that means is 3 different camera views of your environment. Okay, so you might find that you might want a wide shot at a certain angle. So you'd sort of render it, that's what it looks like, save it. I'll call it just render 1. For the moment, the desktop will be fine. Okay, so the next one, you might want it to be a bit of a close-up, say something like that. Render it. Okay, that's your second image, second render, so save image. This will be render 2. And the third one, you know, for argument's sake, top view, whatever. Okay, and that can be render 3. So essentially 3 JPEG views of your environment. Obviously not very interesting because it's in black and white and there's nothing else around it. In reality, you would frame it, and I guess this is what it means, I suppose, with that question is, how have you considered composition? Obviously this is just a generic one, but you still need to make sure that you frame it so there's not a lot of empty space around it. Obviously at this stage, you can see right through the window, there's nothing around it like other buildings or a backdrop or a floor beyond the footpath, so you're going to get some black space. But even so, I guess what you need to do is compose it so you've got a good camera angle. For example, if in your actual finished project you have stuff outside on the footpath, then they would be, that could frame your shot. That could be in the foreground. You might frame your shot sort of slightly with the camera angle looking up if you've got something sort of higher up or adjacent to the shot. Okay, so at the moment it's a little bit sort of theoretical because there's not much there, but you need to consider composition, i.e. how you're going to frame your shot. Okay, so again, you might want to sort of view it this way, render it, and you've got that. But just to make sure that what comes out in the render view is exactly what you see here, because you can see that there's a discrepancy. That's what I've framed, but when I rendered it, see all the black bits? Okay, so this isn't an accurate representation. If you want an accurate representation of when you're moving it around, what it's going to be framed like, what you need to do is go to View, Camera Settings, Resolution Gate. Because what Resolution Gate does, it actually shows the composition in relation to the actual resolution. See, it's got here 1920 by 1080. So when I sort of, and it crops it here. So it's got these white spaces on the right and the left of what's not going to come out. So it frames it exactly what 1920 by 1080 in this case would be. So if I compose my shot sort of like this, have that sort of side wall right up to the end there, got a bit of space there, you've got a little bit of that building on the right peeking through. So if I render this now, you'll see that it's basically, there we go, sort of moved up a bit. Oh, why is it doing that? I'll just save it so I can show you. So I'll just do that as render 4. Okay, close it. And where's render 4? There it is. So you can see basically that rendered image is what this is in terms of the framing. Okay, so you need to make sure that resolution gate is on. So you can know exactly when you're sort of trying to work out a good shot, you know exactly what's going to come out. So at the moment, this is what it looks like. Okay, I was going to talk a little bit about anti-aliasing, but I'm not going to do it, although I will just very quickly suggest it. It's not crucial at the moment. But see if you zoom into a small part of an image, how you get these really, especially on a diagonal, you get these jagged edges. Okay, do people have seen those before? Yep. That's called aliasing. That's because computer imagery is based on pixels, square pixels. So where you've got horizontals or vertical lines, you don't get that jagged edge because it's straight down the pixels, right? But aliasing happens because you've got lines on that are angled, which means it sort of looks step because it's made out of pixels. So it sort of drops each step of the way as it goes along each pixels. So you can improve that. See how it looks jagged like that? You can improve it. Two things that will improve it. One is the image size, although 1920 by 1080, you don't want to get any bigger than that because that's what we're going to be using. Another way of doing it, but I won't go into it now, but I'll mention it for next time when you're doing your proper renders, is, there's the panel, in the render settings panel, there's another tab, and here, the top bits here, it's got anti-aliasing quality. At the moment, it's set to low quality, but you can adjust it. If you want to play around with it, you can, but we're not going to really properly go into it until later on. But what it does is that it looks at where all the little jagged edges are, or the aliasing, and provides what it calls anti-aliasing, or tries to sort of soften or smooth it out so it's a clearer, sharper image. Yeah. Don't worry about that at the moment. Just be aware of it, because if you zoom in your image, you can see my God, it looks really pixelated, but that's fine because for the purposes of this assessment task, you don't have to worry about it. But be aware of it because at some point we will look at anti-aliasing. So the only thing you need to do, and I'll do it one more time, and hopefully this is recording and not run out of tape, to render it. Again, first thing you need to do is make sure you've got your camera setting to resolution gate. So just go camera settings, choose resolution gate. Then you need to double check that the render settings in terms of the image size is 1920 by 1080. Again, don't worry about everything else for the time being. Then you frame your shot accordingly. Again, if I want to sort of do this, just to sort of zoom into the window frame bit. There we go, a lot of white wall, but that's fine. And then you press this button, which is render the current frame. And that's what you've got. And then you save that as, save image. Again, JPEG's fine for now. You only need to do 3 renders, so just number them accordingly. This is render 5. And there they are. Okay, now where to put that in terms of submission, where you need to put it is you've got your Maya project. So this is my Maya project. In the scenes folder, you've got your scene. These renders, I just want you to put them in the images folder because that's where it's going to save them anyway if you set your project, but just slip them in there. So like, for example, if I just get these 3, there they are. Okay, so when I open up your Maya project, I'll open up your scene, set the project, and then I'll look in here and say, oh, there's your renders. Yay, great, that's it. Does that make sense? That's what you need to do. So you've got your Maya scene, but you will need to start getting used to rendering because it's in that part of the process where you're making adjustments, rendering, making adjustments and rendering, where you begin to get close to what you want. Because the view in Maya, this view, is only an estimate. You don't get a full idea of what you've got until you render in terms of the colors, the textures. It's a much cleaner, more accurate representation of what you get. Okay, it's very similar to the view here, but it's a cleaner image. Okay, look, that'll do. Hopefully, I'll go back to QuickTime and it's still, where'd it go?